In today's culture, there can be some really confusing messages about raising boys. Like in the old school approach, many of us were taught to be strong, to not cry, to almost like harden up. But then lots of us feel like, man, we'd love our boys to be compassionate and empathetic. But then it seems like if they do that, they're going to be taken advantage of. And there's all these different types of mixed messages going on in our culture today. And that's why we wanted to bring on Dr. Daniel Ellenberg from Strength with Heart. And we wanted to bring him on because I just love these values of Strength with Heart. The values are that they want to help boys live in a world where men feel the freedom and confidence to be fully human, to have access to the full range of human traits, emotions, and actions, where men are both strong and heartful, dynamic and receptive, assertive and flexible, direct and kind, confident and humble, serious and playful, where men have deeply connected and compassionate relationships with themselves and with others. So if you are a dad listening to this and you want to be that kind of man and want to raise those kind of boys, or if you're a mom raising a boy or boys and you're really wanting to know how to do this, we're going to dive into this today of what that looks like and how you can do certain things that you can do to make that more likely. We're going to touch upon toxic masculinity and competition and all those kind of different topics. And we're really going to dive in deep about ways to approach that in a healthy way with your sons. So get ready to really learn about this topic. If you don't have any boys, definitely share this, listen to it and then share it with people who do, families who do have boys, because Dr. Ellenberg's work is very, very helpful and informative in this area. So sit back and enjoy the podcast today.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
The Art of Raising Humans is a podcast designed to support, equip, and encourage parents on how to create long-lasting, deeply connected relationships with their kids that's free from fear and shame. Come join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to The Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle.
Hi there. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sara.
And, Sarah, something that we really haven't spent much time touching upon specifically, but it has been something we've talked about a lot in our homes.
About a lot.
And I know I come across it a lot helping families, is this topic of boys and men and kind of growing up in this culture, that many of the families that we help, that we coach, that we work with, they're wanting to switch away from the kind of old school way where men were taught to not cry and to not be sensitive and all that kind of stuff. And there's these dads and moms who are like, I want to raise boys who are more sensitive, more empathetic, but then in that process, they're confused how to guide that in a seemingly in a culture that seems to want to make them tough. And if they aren't that way, they're just going to get crushed.
Right. You worry that they can survive without being part of that culture.
Yeah. And if they are too sensitive or they cry, they're going to be seen as weak or seen as, a pansy or something like that, whatever they might be called. Right. And so we see a lot of boys struggling. So that's why today, guys, we wanted to bring on Dr. Daniel Ellenberg. And he's got would you say it's a business? It's a how would you describe
it? About it?
Yeah. It's called Strength with Heart. Right. And there your help. I looked at the core values. They were so beautiful, but I'd love to hear about that and what you're doing to help men today with these issues.
Right. Well, I think that you already touched on one of the big conflicts that exists for boys and men, which is like somehow you're supposed to choose one side of the binary. You're either sensitive or you're tough. Yeah. And I kind of go like, oh, why do we have to? I mean, life isn't like that. There are some times when you do need to be tough. I mean, there's no question about that. Now, of course, we have to define what tough means. And sometimes where sensitivity, vulnerability, openness is what's most called for. The question isn't so much whether you need those particular aspects of yourself. The question is more when. And so a lot of what we really focus on is flexibility. And psychologically, one of the big features in terms of healthy personality, healthy relationships is flexibility. I think about this Winston Churchill line where he said, courage is the willingness to stand up and speak. It is also the willingness to sit down and listen.
Mm.
And when you think like here, the two of you are obviously married and you have children.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes when it's really important to speak your mind. But then there's also, okay, how do you speak your mind in a way that's relational and not just reactive, right? And
Yeah.
then how
Yeah.
do you listen? It's obviously easier to listen when someone's sharing something about, like, when you did X that impacted me in a way that felt bad, or I felt hurt by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're, as a male, in this case, for you, I go, no, I can't. I've never hurt by anything, but of course you are, because
Yeah.
you're a human animal. I like
Yeah.
to call us humanimals,
Yeah.
and we are wired to have the full range of human emotions. And what's weird to me, speaking of binary, is that we live in a world where there's the so-called female side, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
warm,
Yeah.
empathic, compassionate, nurturing,
Nurturing. Yeah.
kind, heartful, and the male side, which is tough, strong, take no prisoner, always in control. And it's complete nonsense,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I believe every human being has the full range of possibilities. And we want to encourage our children to really
Yeah.
have those full range and to bring those out in certain different circumstances.
Yeah, no, I love that, and that sounds ideal. I think the situation, and we can more just speak personally. As I was, and I remember, actually, to be honest with you, when my daughter was born, my oldest, for some reason I felt pretty confident. I wasn't really scared about parenting my daughter. I had this like weird idea in my head that if Abby someday marries somebody like me, I'm cool with that. I was okay with that. But then when my son was born, it just hit me different. I had this, like, as I was holding him, as he came out into the world, it hit me that he's going to look up to me as this model of manhood, as somehow, as if I have this figured out. And I knew there was so much I didn't have figured out, that I all too often
Yeah.
leaned on my anger and to take control of situations, right? And I didn't know how to really show him a different way, and I knew I wanted him to have a different way, and so it actually was kind of a lot more scary to me to start raising a boy, because I didn't feel like I really knew what that meant and how to do it successfully.
So you're already doing something that's outside of what would be considered the traditional male role. You're talking about your fear,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, and which is real. I mean, like,
yeah,
to me, it's one of the oddest things is that somehow, like, guys aren't supposed to be afraid. Hello.
yeah,
So, like, we're all going to die. I mean, not that this is revelatory to anyone here,
yeah,
but that, ultimately, we human beings are vulnerable. At any one moment, boom, you could be taken out of existence. In existential, we talk about walking the line between being and non-being. And if that is not vulnerable, you tell me what is. And so to deny that, which is really to some degree at the core of some ways that guys are told, no, you're not, you're not going to be impacted. But that's crazy. I mean, you
yeah,
think about, like, the ultimate, like, masculine characters in the culture. I mean, there are different groups, but certainly football players are in that camp, right?
yeah.
But it turns out that the average age that NFL players die is 54.
Wow,
54. That's
wow.
over 20 years younger than the average man dies. And they're the
Mm.
toughest, most masculine,
Mm-hmm,
most
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
masculine men.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing football players. That's not my
Yeah, of
point.
course.
It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
But it's more that we have these very simplistic ways of orienting toward people in general, toward women, toward men, and putting it in these little camps and,
yeah,
stereotypes. And to me, it's like you can show up differently as a man. It's not like every man is the same. Not every man is built like a football player, for sure.
yep,
God, you may,
yep, yep,
but but the reality is people show up differently. And
yep,
for me, I long to live in a world where you can be you and not
yeah,
have to fit into this little cookie cutter, shape. And to me, here we're talking about on some level, guys, like individuality. Like,
yeah,
really, so you're such an individual, like you're completely conformist. You're
yeah,
fitting in to this particular category to be I'm a real man, but you're doing it in a way that you can look, this guy's doing it, that guy's doing it, and
Yeah.
it starts early.
Yeah, well, and I would say I remember even early on, I like to roughhouse. I like to do that stuff with my kids, and I remember when I would be doing that with my daughter Abby, if she somehow was hurt in any way, like let's say I got too rough, I would immediately be like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I'd be like, "Oh, let me give you a hug." But if my son did it, I'd be like, "Dude, come on." It's not that big a deal. Like you're not that. I was like so. I was
Kind of this
so
toughen
annoyed by
up.
it.
Mhm.
Like I'd be like, "Why are you crying about that? You barely got her." Whereas with if my daughters ever expressed that, I would have been much more compassionate and empathetic. But with him, I just struggled seeing that as helpful, even though it seemed natural to care about it. It almost felt like I was going to create some weakness in him that I was afraid he would have. You know?
Well, hopefully you didn't name him Sue. You know, like you
No.
think of the
Yes.
Johnny Cash song, "A Boy Named Sue, I did this to make
Oh
you
yes.
nuts." But that,
Yes.
that is a reality there. I mean, there are a lot of parents like you two, who are trying to raise sensitive boys and to
Yeah.
be compassionate, empathic,
Yeah.
connected, and then they send them to school, and then again get shamed
Yep.
for that. And so it's like this really weird world in a way because the world is changing, but it hasn't changed. And we
Yeah.
have these ways where, there's like a movement for guys to become more emotional, but then there's an aggressive, or a pushback to this, and no, let's go back to the old ways. I think that the difficulty is uncertainty, in a way,
Yeah.
and just the ambiguity about how do you show up. And I having worked with a lot of guys and having kind of read a lot and really being involved with kind of men's psychology, essentially, you know, it's very clear that a lot of men are super confused about like
Yeah.
what is a man? Like
Yeah.
what's a real man? What does that mean even?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
so they get this like you're fine the way you are, be a tough guy, and there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. A term I don't like at all.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and then there's like don't excuse can I I'm gonna say it like a lot of some of the messages are like the best a guy can be is not an asshole.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not inspiring
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
guys. So I just kind of
Yeah.
go like it's kind of wrong headed. And so I
Yeah.
tend to look at things through how do we actually increase a word that most people never think about, which is the word is complexity, meaning
Mm,
that we all have different aspects of our personality. I mean, I know for me, like I can be very tough in certain ways and very unyielding, and like this is what I believe, and I
yeah.
stand on this. And other ways where I can be, I don't know exactly how I feel about this, and maybe I feel insecure. I feel strong and confident in some ways, and weaker and more vulnerable and more hesitant in other ways. But to recognize that we're not just one thing. We're not one
Yeah.
being. We're not always the same. And if we always have to be the same, it's like the Abraham Maslow line. If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And you
Yeah.
need more
Yeah.
tools in life. Sometimes
Yeah.
you need to be yielding and open and listen. Sometimes you need to stand up and speak your mind. But it's like, well, how do you do it? What do you base it on? And
Yeah.
so in many ways, you actually have to have a deeper relationship with yourself, which is
Yeah.
you have
Mhm.
to know yourself, or should
Yeah.
I say, you have to know yourselves more.
Yeah.
eh,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so to be able to look within and go, oh, this is really kind of what's going on. Awareness, self-awareness is a crucial thing. And a lot of guys, they just learn, don't look inside. It's just
Yeah.
like
Yep.
be on the outside and be tough and be strong and be in control. And you never really get to notice when actually in a certain situation where you actually feel scared. And
Yeah.
that's real. And
Yep.
that, but you're not supposed to be feeling that way,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you shouldn't be feeling that way, but you do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
how do you actually become congruent, with yourself? And the first part of it has to be with like, oh, okay, there is a way or there's a part of me that feels scared right now. And then have compassion for yourself.
Yeah.
Oh my God, there's that thing, self compassion, right? You have
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
passion for yourself around, yeah, it's understandable that you would. I mean,
Yeah.
you're on a plane and it's going like this,
Yeah.
but you're not supposed to be scared. Like your body is reacting to that. And then your mind can be somewhere else. And so a lot of the work is about bringing those together and how do you become more integrated.
Well, I want to jump off of that real quick because Sarah and I were just talking about, our youngest plays soccer and she does competitive soccer. And there's times where dads will be yelling, right? Dads will be yelling at the kids. And for the most part, I don't mess with that. Like if they're yelling at their own team, whatever. I don't think it's, I've done my own work not to do that. I don't think it's helpful for them to do it. But then there'll be a time where they'll start yelling at the ref. And a lot of times these refs are young, teenagers or something like that, right? And so then I tell Sarah, like, I will say something to them. And typically it is something kind of aggressive. Like I'll tell them to shut up. I'll say, shut up, stop talking to her. And I told Sarah, like, I feel like there's probably a better way to do it, but I feel like in order to speak that guy's language, I have to say it in this aggressive way. And then recently, when I did this, one of the guys said to me, "Hey, what are you going to do about it?" And
Sure,
I felt when he said that, I did feel some fear, but
sure.
I quickly turned that fear into this anger that said, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm just telling you to shut your mouth. And like I just said it like that. And then the guy didn't say anything else. Right. So I didn't have to get aggressive, but I did say it in a way that probably wasn't kind. It wasn't, like I wasn't like proud per se of how I handled it, but it got the job done. But I did feel as a guy, there is this like the fear pops up, and then I quickly convert that into anger. And then I use the anger then to get control seemingly of the situation. And I just don't want my son thinking that's the only way to do that.
Well, apparently that isn't the only way to do that, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you're thinking that this isn't the best way. What's
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
way? But I think that for all of us, we learn certain cultural memes and themes that get internalized. They become part of us, and it's all part of survival. I have to do this to fit in, to be part of that particular group or clan or tribe or whatever that is, and that becomes standard fare until we recognize that, you know what, that doesn't feel quite right. It's like kind of warmer, 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 hotter, colder, colder, cold. Like you start moving toward coldness in a
Yeah.
certain way and go, really, what is my intent here? My intent is, in this case, for this guy to pipe down,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
not do this, what seems abusive, and you feel
Yeah.
protective. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a cool, good impulse. You want to protect
Yeah.
kids. I mean, and so to find a way to communicate that in a way that maybe could even be potentially educational for that guy, like going over and saying, "Come, guy, he's just a young kid.
Yeah.
Like it's probably really hard for him to hear that from a grown man."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like saying something like that,
Yeah.
the guy's gonna go, "Oh God, yeah, he's right, shoot." But if you do it in a way where you're not just directly doing this
Yeah.
thing, it's probably better. I know a little bit about this myself, having been more that way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I'm a bunch older than you, and
Yeah.
I've been through the school of hard knocks. In fact, I've been through several of those schools, and I I just find that people in general are much more willing to listen and be open if you approach them in a way where you respect their humanity. And also
Yeah.
get that this guy is just conditioned. He's like acting like a machine in a certain way. He's been conditioned that way. His father was probably like that. It's passed down through the generations, and it's like, how much is a person really acting on their own individual inclinations, and how much are they just being kind of more habitual,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like addictive to this old way of being.
I think there's this like pressure I feel as I parent a boy. And I think, man, if I send him out there and I can see that he is thoughtful, that he's got a lot, he easily kind of sees where the other person's coming from, and he approaches them with this softer, vulnerability, and then they just like eat him alive. you know? And it's how do I prepare, how do I help him hold on to that? Right? That's a great skill. And that's the direction I'd love to see the world be able to come, where people
Sure,
can come together
sure.
and communicate and listen to each other, but at the same time, prepare him for this. That's not how everybody is, and that's not how everything is. So how do I help him be able to be in that world but hang on to this world? And if that makes sense, how
Totally.
can I do
Yeah,
that? What do I do with him now to prepare him? And
well, and Daniel, even in that, on top of that, is this idea that we think the world could do this better. We want our son to
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
somebody who changes it and makes it a better place, right? But then there's also, how do we help him in the meantime also
Hmm.
navigate? Because I see so many boys his age who are very empathetic and kind, and they're just so heartbroken that other boys are so mean to each other,
Yeah.
and that they purposely will mock them, and they're almost like confused, like, why would you do that? And so then they're just like stunned in those moments about how to respond,
Well,
you know?
they're not almost confused.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, they are confused. I mean,
yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't make sense to them. I mean, this is where education comes in, and education, most importantly, happens in the house. And so I just be very direct, and literally say like, I love your sensitivity. It's a beautiful thing. It's actually a superpower to be able to do that. And if you can hold on to that as a guy, it becomes a major superpower as you get older.
yeah. Mm,
And so I want to honor that sensitivity in you and prepare you for the way the world is. Not the world that we would like to see, but the way the world is currently. And
yeah, yeah,
we ourselves want to be change makers, in this world. And ideally, um, you will be also.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we don't recommend that you just cry, all the time. There are times when,
yeah,
you have to be really looking at, is this the best time to bring out, oh, that hurt my feelings, when there are four kids who are calling you a pussy, a horrible
yeah,
name,
yeah, yes,
but
yeah,
is that the best time to
yeah,
do that? And the answer is probably no, it's not. That doesn't mean you have to completely annihilate your own sense of sensitivity, but it does mean at that particular moment, and this is what I'm talking about flexibility, really. At this moment, it's like this is a time for a boundary.
yeah,
This is not a time to be open arms. This is a time to say
sure,
no, and to trust your no, and this is not okay. And sometimes you just need to just stand up like
yeah,
that Churchill line, stand up and speak.
yep,
This is not a time to necessarily be yielding, and to recognize that is just part of how you grow up, so that when you go into different situations and circumstances with different people, you're able to draw on different parts of yourself, and that's actually the highest form of intelligence. Because if you
mm,
want to be a truly smart person, the best way to do that is to be able to read people and to be able to see how, given my values, and to be clear about those values, how can I express my values through my behavior in a way that's going to be the most intelligent? And that
yeah,
it can be very different in different ways. Like sometimes anger, like yelling, that may be the appropriate thing to do. Doesn't mean
yeah,
like never yell. I hear
yeah,
some of this
yeah,
parenting advice. He says, never say no to your child. Like,
yes,
what
yes,
world are you living in?
yes, yes.
Seriously, like no is a microaggression? Come on.
Mhm,
Like it
mhm,
becomes so extreme, in
mhm,
certain ways. But then it's like you can't always say yes. But how can
yeah,
you say no with kindness,
yes,
right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
complex.
yeah,
mhm,
And to
yeah,
recognize
no,
these kids,
yeah,
preparing them for the world is, that's a big thing. And the more that they can actually feel like you can be I hate to use words like superhero, things,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
really you can like you choose different role models as men, and who are can be in my language, they can be strong and heartful.
yeah,
They're not mutually exclusive. They're actually part of being an intelligent human being.
Yeah. Well, and as you're talking, I'm picturing, Daniel, I'm picturing if I was going to be this man, for my son and to show him is in these moments like you described. I mean, I'm picturing these moments when kids are making fun of you or like, and I'm like, what did I do as a kid? Back then, I would lean into my anger and I would just get bigger. I would get more aggressive and I would quote unquote make those kids stop by being meaner. Right. But really in that moment, I know I'm just reacting to the fear and I'm trying to control the fear by being scary actually and trying to get
Sure.
them away from but what is cool I have seen some adults do this or some kids do this where in those moments it's not that they don't care. Some kids will go that direction. They'll get hard and just not care and the kids will make fun of them and they'll say, yeah, I don't care what they say.
Right.
But then there's other kids who don't take it personal and they realize that what those kids are doing and saying is about them and
Yeah.
it's actually not about you at all, and then they can actually say something pretty smart in that moment or pretty witty in that moment or something that completely changes the whole interaction. And the kids are all of a sudden like laughing. Like I remember there's one kid, he was really short, I was helping, and he would get made fun of a lot for being short. And then I asked him one day, like, well, what's so great about being short? He said, I win at hide and seek all the time. So I can hide. And so I said, hey, why don't you try that? Next time the bully picks on you and he makes fun of you, just say, hey, if you wanted to play hide and seek, I would totally kick your butt. And he said, when he said that, the kid laughed. He's like, dude, you would. What's the coolest place you've hidden? And then it
Right.
just turned that whole, and so what I was trying to help him do was not, I didn't want him to just be like, don't care what that kid says. It doesn't matter what he says, because it does matter what he says. But he was able then to feel secure in who he was as just a kid who was height challenged and he was able to turn that situation around to a humorous one.
Exactly. I mean, if you can draw on humor, if you think about these potential conflicts as a challenge, in a way, like let's face it, guys are going to challenge each other. I mean, if you look in the animal kingdom, it's like you look at these male bucks and slamming their
Yeah.
horns on each other. This is part of the process. I mean, where I have some challenges some of these days about the parent, like everyone wins a medal and
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
all, there's no real competition. Like, come on, seriously. I mean, that's not what life is. The
Yeah.
issue is really around, okay, if you're going to be competitive, there are certain contexts where there's a winner and loser. I mean, let's
Yeah.
face it.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason why people love sports. It's like it's just so dynamic that it's going to come to a conclusion and there's going to be it's a yes or a no. And in life, a lot of times it's way more ambiguous than that. Was I
Yeah.
successful? Well, I mean, it's like it's not clear, but there are
Yeah.
certain arenas where it is very clear. Who won, who lost, and it's gripping. And I mean, personally, I think that's cool. I think a
Yeah.
lot of guys get shamed around being competitive, and I think that that's wrong-headed. I mean, literally, the etymology of the word means to strive together, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think about, I'm a tennis fan.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think about these two new bucks, who are Alcaraz and Sinner,
Yes.
like
Of course. Yeah.
incredible players, and
Hmm.
and they like each other off the
Yeah.
court,
Yeah.
but on the court, they're happy that the other one exists because it pushes them to
Yes.
keep getting better.
Yeah.
And I think that if we look at competition in that way, that the other person is not, or the other team, they're not enemies. That's where I get so concerned politically, like I'm the
Yeah.
enemy. They're
Yeah.
opponents. They're not in agreement with you, then they're trying to win, but they shouldn't be disregarded or treated as subhuman in
Yes.
some
Yeah.
way. And they can be used as catalysts. And a lot of parts of life, they're not competitive. But that mentality can, if that filters into your marriage, and you're constantly trying to win an argument. I know that's never happened between you two, right?
Hmm.
Oh, it did. It did early on. You're hitting
I'm, I'm,
exactly.
I'm,
We had to learn our way through that. Yes.
I'm actually joking because there's no
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I mean, so it's like to recognize that that's a certain mindset that may be more appropriate in a different context. And that's why
Yeah.
I really emphasize the importance of know your context. What
Yeah.
context are you in? And like guys, we mess with each other,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
and frankly get shamed by women at times, like, "Oh, you
Yep.
guys are so like this or that," and
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
like, you don't understand. This is
Yep.
actually where the guys connect. Like
Yep.
I love women. I have many women in my
Yep.
life,
Yep.
and they don't mess like men do. I mean, that's just the reality. And guys,
Yep.
when my son, picked up a stick when he was little, and so my wife was shocked. She wasn't used to that. Like, what?
Yes.
It's like, was that because he was, shamed? No, it's a natural, organic, hardwired way of being. And I
Yep.
think that what we really need to do is work with the way things are, not what we think they should be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, there's a reason why there have been rites of passage throughout history, where
Yep.
the boys are separate. I think some of them are like way, way too intense. And I'm not in
Yeah.
agreement with some of you have to break bones and
Yep. Yep.
supposed to come back and not look at women and like
Yep.
that's insane. It's too extreme. But there is a way that guys will kind of play with each other. Like I think about I left a water bottle at my gym. I stopped by there yesterday to pick it up, and the owner of the gym, he said he's kind of like he kind of picks it up and he gives it to me. He says, I drank out of this. He's kind of effing with me, in a way. And I said, really? I hope it tasted really good. You Yeah. And then I said to him, but I think I look at you right now. I think you have less hair. I think what happened is,
Yes.
they,
Yes.
and so we like to a couple people who were standing by, they started laughing about it. Like it was like this little, like it was a little competition in a certain way, but
Yes. Yeah.
playful, and
Yep.
that's what for me part of my relation with friends is like I like that. In college,
Yeah.
I will often be the person who's going to poke first, and you kind of like see how does somebody respond. Can I play with this person?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
a lot of times, what happens with guys is that they're, if I can say, they're effing with each other and
Yeah.
something like,
Yeah. Yep.
can you take this? Like, can I
Yep.
bring out this part of my personality with you? And if you get like, oh, that, if you go into like, that hurt my feelings,
Yep.
okay. But then if you can say that, like, that was too far,
Yeah.
right? And that I think is an area that I'd like to see male friendships evolve,
Yep.
because
Mm.
a lot of times what happens is guys are like playing with each other. They're playing, and then someone actually gets hurt.
Yep.
They're all fun and games until someone gets a stick in their eye, kind of thing.
Sure.
And then they don't have the resources to say that was too far,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Because then that's weak in some way. What happens is play turns into threat. And this is where a lot of negative stuff happens. And if you can recognize that, okay, all of a sudden I feel threatened here, and my reaction is to be aggressive or hostile in reaction, and that triggers the other, and then it can
Yeah.
a playful interaction can turn into a fight. It happens very often, and certainly happens with boys. And I'd like to see where there's just kind of an education, there that said like, it's cool to be competitive and to play and mess around and everything, and sometimes people get hurt, including you. And how
Yeah.
do you have the resources and really the emotional awareness to recognize when that's happening and to be willing to speak to that and have people who are like, oh, okay, I got it. I went too far
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
What?
Having been someone I led weekly men's groups for 40 years. I don't believe that doing something for 10,000 hours like Malcolm Gladwell believe that
Yes.
suddenly a master. But if that
Yep.
were the case, I would be a master.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
did it so long, stopped that a year and a half ago when I turned 70.
Yeah. Wow.
Older.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Just keep getting older. It's weird.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but what I see in these groups is like people mess around with each other. It's not like
Yep.
just, oh, yes, we're going to be like that's part of it. And yet, sometimes when we get, what just happened there? Well, pissed me off when he said that. What happened?
Yep.
What go underneath the level of that? Well, it seemed like he was calling me weak. Do you have any fears
Mm.
about that yourself? Well, sure,
Yeah.
everyone does. and
Yep.
that triggered me, and then I got defensive and I attacked there.
Yep.
And so part of the work is really around developing an awareness about your inner landscape. And one of the big problems with guys is that we learn not to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And that's a massive problem because most of what's going on is actually outside of awareness.
Yeah.
And so we're reacting from a humanimal, word I used earlier, from a humanimal perspective. And the more that you can actually kind of tune in and go, oh, that's actually what's happening, and to be able to communicate that. And so I think about, how much courage that takes, really.
Yes.
Now, we're trying to expand the definition of courage in a book I just finished called Strength with Heart,
Yeah.
redefining manhood without losing the man.
Yeah.
In
That's
there,
awesome.
is really around, like, it takes courage to look inside and to be with that which
Mm.
is super uncomfortable, super
Yeah.
vulnerable, and it takes courage to speak.
Yeah.
Interpersonal courage, not just you're a jerk, but also like that hurt my feelings.
Yeah. Yep.
That
Mhm.
you lost me on that. I was with a friend in Denver. We were at our American Psychological Association convention. We were out to dinner, and very close friend, connection, co-author of my book. And I started talking about a situation that was very vulnerable for me, which is that
Yeah.
my wife was having an upcoming surgery, and she
Okay.
was afraid of not making it. She made it. We're on the other side of August
That's great.
26th. This
Yeah.
is being, and I started talking about it, and it immediately started talking about his wife who had some medical issue, and I was
Mm.
kind of like, that's too soon. Like, you didn't
Yes.
hear me. Like, you heard it
Yes.
long enough to remind you about something about
Yeah.
yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
Yeah.
know myself well
Mm.
enough to know that if I don't say something, I'm going to disconnect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so I just said something very quickly. I just said, you know, Fred, I was just talking about this, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't feel like you really heard me out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't say like, oh my God, I'm crushed by it,
Yes.
which I was.
That's
I mean, I
right.
wasn't crushed by it, but
Yes.
there was a little bit of an ouch there. And I
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
something to him. He goes, oh yeah, I get it. And he like, because we work with each other like that.
Yeah.
We speak
Yep.
about what comes up in real time there, and that's part of being in relationship. And just going back to the boy crisis, really, and
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the books on this, boys learn to disconnect early, and because of this shaming and blaming, going, oh, you're weak, you this, you that. No, I'm not. And so here we have this massive crisis of disconnection that's going on, and we're not dealing with it very well. So when you think about, like, I'm sure your son,
Yeah.
was super sweet and connected, want to be held and everything like
Yeah.
that,
Yep.
and then learn somehow that that's not cool
Yep.
to want to be touched, and then they disconnect. Like that, that's wrong-headed.
Yep.
That's where
Mhm.
our culture is completely off. It's not the only one. It's not like somehow, what is it? If you sparing the rod, what's that? What's that?
Spoil the child.
Spoil,
Spare the rod, spoil the
spare,
child. Yep.
spare the rod. Like, come on,
Yeah. Yeah.
seriously, that's not real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I feel like I see with our son, I feel like I almost have to just intentionally watch him when he's had these interactions or I see these moments. And I have to be very intentional about checking in with him later,
right,
you know, and following up with what was going on inside of you in that moment, and because I see him either toughen up
Yeah.
sometimes
Yep.
right,
or keep his, and it depends on the direction he goes. I feel like I've got to check in and help him. What was going on inside?
exactly,
Why did you go that direction? What was the messaging in your head? And that's even where we found out one time that he had this messaging, well, I'm a guy, I've got to learn how to be angry.
Yep.
I got to
Yep.
be angrier,
right,
because men are angry.
right,
And think conversations come up, but on my side of it, I have to do the work of going to him and paying attention and checking in, because I don't know how long that message would have run its course. without noticing and without, coming up and saying, whoa, what was going on there? Why'd you go that direction in that interaction?
Yeah, it was really great that Sarah noticed that, because then that gave me the opportunity to like touch base. Like, have I shown you that? Is that something I've? And sometimes he's like, yeah, like people I've pointed out in movies, like, oh, I like how that guy said that. They're typically saying it like a really passionate, almost angry way, and that's just actually not his personality. That doesn't. So then he feels like, I think there's this. I need to be more like that, even though that's not me. And so I was telling him, like, dude, you don't need to be like that, you know? And so Sarah being able to notice that, be sensitive to that. I've always told Sarah, when you see those things, please let me know, because I just don't see them as much.
Right?
You know, like I'm just not as aware of them when those happen, those little nuances in him. And she sees them, she tells me, and then I can go back and connect with him on them too.
Nice. If you think about, like in this case, anger, like what's the purpose? Like I thinking about, like, on some level, all behavior is related to some intention, or
Hmm.
some desire, or some outcome there. And so anger, from an evolutionary perspective, is generally seen as an experience that someone has transgressed on your boundaries.
Hmm. Hmm.
Want to get them out of your boundaries. You want to have your ground, kind of your grounded being. So that's the purpose of it. And so with your son, like, what does he want? Like, what's underneath that?
Yeah.
What's the fear, or the concern, or the question, or doubt, there? And then it's like, is there another way of affecting the outcome you're wanting in a different way that's more consonant with your personality? You know, I
Mhm.
suggest that to yell at people is not a good, in general. I don't care what your wiring is. It's
Yeah.
just counterproductive overall.
Yep. Yep.
But having your boundaries is very important,
Yeah.
because,
Mhm.
sometimes you don't know when you've stepped over somebody's boundaries unless they tell you. Like, someone could be super introverted, and you talking too long is a boundary violation for them.
Yeah.
And they don't have
Yep.
to say anything. And so what do? They kind of like shut down. If you think about, basic defenses, the four F's, fight, flight, freeze, fawn,
Yeah.
and so you either fight, you can just freeze or run away on some level. And people have different defensive strategies. Now, the guy's
Yeah.
strategy is usually, it's considered the fight, just fight, right?
Yeah.
But that's not true, and that's not just the reality for any guy. There's no one
Hmm.
who just fights. Sometimes they freeze, sometimes they
Yep.
flee, sometimes they fawn, meaning they appease, essentially, when actually they don't feel that way. Generally, like when you look at male and female defenses, women would definitely more likely fawn than fight, and that's just part of what's taught. And maybe it's part of, like, being, biologically weaker than most men. That's fine. That doesn't mean better or worse. It just means that there's differences, and you have to find out what do I really want in this, and that has to do with an awareness about what is it like. I want this. Like, I think about my father, who was a major rager. He only had fight. I mean, it was just like
Hmm.
amazing. That
Hmm.
was his
Yeah.
whole deal. And then he died at 49, of a
Wow.
heart attack. And it was like, you're real strong there, right? Because you're fighting
Yeah. Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
nobody will mess with you. And then you go an early grave, And he really a lot of times wanted love, and he just yelled at people because he wanted to be loved. And it's
Yeah.
like, how well is that working for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not. So to be aware about what do you actually want is really crucial. And then we don't teach kids this.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm always amazed, like, what is education really about?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like, really, like, this, like, education is arbitrary. Like, this is
Yeah.
what's put together, and this is what's going to prepare you for being a human being in life. Like, if I were reorganizing general education, I certainly wouldn't do what we're doing in general.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd start off with the main R first, which is relationships.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that because I think so many teenagers would feel the same as you. They're saying like, "Why are we doing education this way?" I think it's coming to that point. But on that point of education, what I'd ask you in kind of like wrapping this up is, let's say you have a dad or mom listening to this podcast, and their heart and their goal is to raise a son who is strong, but has is connected to their heart as well, and they're not just toughening up and getting hard because they saw that in their childhood, they didn't like it, but they also fear they're going to raise a kid who, you know, for a lack of a better term, is a snowflake or is somehow a
right,
wuss, right?
right.
So what would you say would be those first steps or ways in which they could approach that to raise a son like that?
Well, I would say, like, if you really want to have good relationships with people, you need to know yourself better. You know, in our book, Strength with Heart, the first place we start, we have 9 guideposts of
Okay.
Strength with Heart, and it starts with noticing.
Yeah.
And noticing is another way of talking about awareness, which is noticing what you're actually experiencing and to pay attention to your body. I mean,
Hmm.
so many people, it's not just men,
Yeah.
get disconnected from like what is really going on inside here. And it turns out
Yeah.
it's not so easy, to know that we confabulate, we make up stories about narratives about really what we're feeling, but oftentimes, we're convinced, but we're wrong.
Yeah.
And so I would really focus on when Johnny did X, Y, Z, what was that like? I got really angry. Okay, you got really angry. Let's go a little deeper. Did you feel threatened in some way?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely felt threatened. Okay, so what do you do when you feel threatened? I get tough. Is there another way of taking care of that sense of threat that's going to make you feel actually better in the end? There and to be more kind of aware of that way. Because, as humanimals, we live really between this first portal of perception, which is, basically safety versus threat,
Yeah.
trust versus distrust, friend or foe. That's the first order bit. Like we're just meeting for the first time.
Yeah. Yep.
There's going to be that organization around like we're not going to necessarily be thinking about it consciously, but
Yep.
unconsciously, that's like as an animal, just like any other animal, is like they're organized, around that. My son is introduced his cat to his girlfriend's dog, and they're like checking each other out, and like it's safe, friend versus foe, safety versus. It's just that's life.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yep.
so I would educate the kids around that there are major parts of life and that you need to find a way to feel safe in yourself. And then how do you do that? What are the ways that you can feel safe in yourself? Be it through your words or through your actions in some way, but recognize that it's very easy to feel threatened. And that's actually the best way to control people. You see this politically,
Yep.
just
Yep.
threaten people, scare the
Yep.
heck out of them, and they'll follow you.
Yeah.
And that's it's a tried and true way of tyrants through the beginning of human history.
Yeah.
That's how you do it, right? Get people scared and they'll get in line. And
Yeah.
so we want people to feel safe. We want our children to feel safe. What's going to maximize the probability of you feeling safe? Right? And so you have to, there's a whole process by which of
Yeah.
like really kind of bringing this out. I mean, if you think about education, I love it. I love etymology, and it turns out that there are
Mhm.
two different words for education. One is educare, which means to put in from without, which is basically what education often is these days. You're teaching someone, you're putting something in this so-called empty vessel.
Yeah.
And the other is educere, which means to draw out from within.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We don't do that.
Yeah.
But that's a major part of education. That's a part of how I would reorganize, the whole
Yeah.
educational process around how do you get people to learn from within. And so part of it has to do with inquiry. So if the kid comes home and someone bullied him in
Yep.
school, what was that like for you?
Yeah.
Don't go out and like, don't go fight him. Go out and don't take no shit from him. Like, go out and
Yeah.
fight
That's
him.
right. Yeah.
No,
Yes. Yeah.
no, it's just like what actually happened inside you.
Yeah.
Help that kid develop awareness. Well, actually, my heart started really racing. And what
Yeah.
did that tell? I actually felt nervous. And what did you want to do then? I wanted to run away, but I couldn't run away. So, what are other ways that you could handle this?
Yeah.
How do you set your boundaries in a way that's going to be help you to feel safe? Are there people you can talk to about this? And so,
Yeah.
you're not thinking like that.
Yeah.
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 As parents, our job, I believe, is to help them develop a better internal narrative, to
Yes. Yeah.
understand more
Yep.
about what's going on so that they have greater internal resources and external resources.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had clients who were bullied as kids. They never told their parents because they told
Yes.
their parents didn't would never. I mean, like, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
Yeah.
Very
for
Yeah. Yeah.
true.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, and what I love about that, so anybody listening, when you're hearing this idea of these intentional conversations with your kids, the thing I love about parenting, Daniel, is doing that with my son has made me more a man who is strong and has heart. Because, like, I mean, there have been moments where I've reacted. I'm thinking of a moment where I was really proud of him, where he was probably like 5, and there was something he was doing, and I wanted him to give this pen back to his sister, and he was caught up whatever he's doing, and I took it as like a personal offense that he wasn't listening to me. So I grabbed the pen from him, and he looked at me and he said, "You didn't need to do that. I was about to give it to her, but like, you don't want me grabbing things from you. Why would you do it to me?" And I just, in that moment, it was so, I just felt such pride. I was like, that was awesome. Like, way to go, man. You just called me out and kind of like called something out of me that I don't want to be that kind of person who just goes and grabs things from people, that I could have in that moment been more self-controlled, been more patient. I didn't need to take it personal,
Right.
and the fact that I even told him, I said, "Brendan, the fact that you could do that to me when I looked scary, I bet I looked scary." He's like, "You looked really scary." I said, "But you still stood up to me and you told me not to treat you that way."
See, that's
That was awesome.
that says a lot about you, Kyle. See, I think that's fantastic role modeling. I mean, there are a lot of guys who would not have done the same thing. They would have taken it as a competition, right? My
Yeah.
son is
Yeah.
messing with me. I'm the boss, and I'm going to vanquish him right now. I'm going to squish him.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
instead of
Yep.
that, you were actually able to step back and go, wow, that's
Yeah.
cool, and be respectful
Yeah.
and recognize that he is a separate being and you treated him with integrity, as an integral being there, and you acknowledge that capacity in him. So that reinforce that rather than, just say, just do what I say, go to
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
room or hit the kid, which,
Yeah.
Mhm.
sadly, that happened.
Sure.
So to
Yeah.
give
Yeah.
yourself credit for that,
Yeah,
Kyle,
yeah, thank you.
right? Because
Yeah, yeah, and well, and there's other times where I probably have sensed that competitive thing in me, and even told Sarah, like, I feel like I just need to get bigger than him in this moment. I need to like almost overwhelm him with my bigness to let him know he can't get bigger than me. And those moments, I know I'm reverting back to what my dad would have done. And I know there's so many dads I know that I get to help, and moms who really want to learn that balance. And I really feel like you've helped them at least see that today, what that could look like, because they really want to raise these boys who do know how to be strong and stand up for themselves, but they don't have to do it by dehumanizing other people to
exactly.
do it. They actually, what's beautiful about doing it with strength and heart is you actually humanize yourself and the other person
Absolutely,
by setting those boundaries with them,
absolutely.
and that's our goal, and that's how we want to raise all our kids, but
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
definitely our son in this world that gives all these mixed messages. So I would ask you, Daniel, how could, if people want to know more about your work, you've mentioned your book, but what's some ways that they can get connected with you, or even have coaching with you if they wanted that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing a lot of coaching these days. I'm doing mainly leadership coaching,
Oh,
in
great. Okay.
organizations. And I actually was going to say something about leadership, which is that when you look at the most respected leaders in general, they actually are like that. They're actually able to
Mm,
admit when they were off, to acknowledge what, I chose this direction, clearly not working. There's an old Turkish saying that no matter how far you've gone in the wrong direction, there's no shame in turning back. But
Mm, yeah,
a lot of guys will they just keep going. Like,
yeah,
I'm not finding the sunset running east. I just have to run faster. Like,
yes,
no, you
yes,
need to change your strategy.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
open your mind. There,
yeah,
like the
yeah,
Matrix, right? Open your mind.
yes,
And
yes.
so, in terms of getting in touch with rewireleadership.com is
Okay,
one way,
okay,
rewireleadership.com. And there's also strengthwithheart.com.
okay.
There.
Okay.
And remind us the name of the book again.
It's called Strength. It's not out yet. We are
Okay. Oh, it's coming out. Okay. When's it coming out?
we were actually speaking to an agent in a couple hours.
Okay.
We're earlier. The book is done, but we're
Yes.
early into that stage. But I'll be
Yes.
doing some training, a long training for men next year. So
Okay.
if people reach out, they can find out about it. It'll be primarily online. Even people like you, Kyle.
Yes, yeah, it'd be great. No, once you mentioned, I was like, I want to read that book. Dang it, it's not out yet. So, well, we want to thank you so much, Daniel, for taking the time to talk with us because this is really something so many people are looking for help on and trying to get this mix just right.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
really want to raise some boys that do change this world, and just create a different expectation from
Exactly.
having just hard and strong. Yeah,
We need to
yeah,
change the paradigm. I also want to acknowledge you two because you've both been very honest about yourselves, and that's what's important. Like we are human beings, we are all flawed in our own ways, and we're all great in our own ways. And just to recognize that there is no perfection, we make mistakes. It's not about perfection because that implies never making a mistake, which is absurd.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
this whole thing like practice makes perfect. That's BS.
yeah,
Practice does not make perfect. Practice
yeah,
makes
yeah,
better, not
yeah,
perfect.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's like being able to course correct, which is really at the core of excellence, is what's not you make mistakes and like, okay, what can I learn from that rather than what's wrong with me or he did it. It's
Yes.
her fault or his fault.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Like
yeah,
take some responsibility there.
yeah. Love that. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
taking the
Thank
time.
you. Thank you.
And any listeners who want to know more about his work, definitely go check out the websites, and we'll put those in the show notes. And then hopefully he'll get his book out sometime soon to help us
Hopefully,
men
I
be
hope.
able to understand this better. Okay. So thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.